Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
One of the offshoots of the Iranian war and this whole shutdown in the Strait of Hormuz, etc., in the Persian Gulf, is that the Middle Eastern oil is no longer reliable. And yes, there are east-west pipelines from Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states, and they may build more, but the fact is it's too easy to blackmail oil. Now, we don't have that problem here in the United States or the Western Hemisphere, and in fact, energy production is growing, not shrinking, and that's could be the new world order. That's what's going to be propelling future oil. It's a sort of OPEC for the Americas. Anyway, let's talk to my pal, Dan Brouillette, who's a partner and co-chair of Torridon Group. He's a former energy secretary. We worked together in Mr. Trump's first term. Dan, welcome. Thanks for helping out. You know, you've got wonderful things going on with Venezuela and Argentina and perhaps, I think, Guyana. You know, Chevron has to get the rights to Guyana, which could be one of the deepest reservoirs in the world. And we are reliable. Right? There's no blackmail. You make a contract, you build a tanker, and we will deliver, quite unlike what's been going on in the Middle East. So this gives us a major leg up to really be, I know we're dominant, but I mean super dominant.
That's right, Larry, super dominant. I like that term. You're absolutely correct. I mean, I think, look, our friend Dan Yergin wrote a book about this. It's called The New Map, and it really does speak to the effects of the development of technologies here in the U.S., like hydraulic fracturing, and the fact that it has put the United States in a now energy independent posture. We are now able to produce more energy than we actually need. That's why we're able to export. But I would add one more point. Not only are we reliable in the United States because of our production numbers, because of our legal system where we have sanctity of contract, we also do things that no other nation does. And what I mean by that is when you buy natural gas from the United States, when you buy liquefied natural gas, LNG, and it goes onto a ship, it's yours. If you want to resell it on the open market, there are no delivery clauses, no delivery contracts, requirements, I should say, in our contracts. So it's a free enterprise system. And that's what makes our system so much more attractive than some of these other systems you mentioned, the Middle East. For instance, nothing against my friends in Qatar. But if you buy natural gas from Qatar, you have to deliver it where you said you were going to deliver it. You're not allowed to freely trade that on the market. So
I didn't know that.
Approach.
I didn't. So that's like a property rights issue.
Yeah, in many respects. Yeah, but it makes our system and our products and our industry so much more attractive, and that's why I think, to your point, that not only do we have to look at the Middle East a little differently and maybe less reliable, we have to look at the United States as even more attractive, and that's just a fundamental change.
What do you think is the story? China buying all this oil from Iran, and now we're putting an end to that with the blockade. Now, I'm reading, super tankers are pulling into the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America now, to be filled up, presumably, by American operations. But how much of that, how much is China hurt or helped by that? Is there a substitution? I mean, it can't be that easy. I mean, I think to some extent we have them over a barrel, not to be too clever, but the fact of the matter is, we don't have all that. We're developing more oil for export, but we have to worry about domestic consumption also and domestic production. In other words, how difficult is it going to be for China to adjust to an era where they're not going to have access to Iranian oil, they're not going to have access to the Strait of Hormuz, they're going to have to deal with the United States?
Well, I think that's true. I mean, if they want to continue any sort of economic growth as we've seen in China over the last 20 years or so, they're going to have to rely on the United States. Because, as you pointed out, U.S. barrels are now the most reliable in the world. There are no choke points, there are no war risk. You can load a super tanker at scale. When the market gets nervous, you're going to see more and more buyers coming to the Gulf Coast of the United States. And I think that's true for China. I think it's true, obviously, for Asia's other parts of Asia, Japan, Korea in particular, very big importers of U.S. LNG. And I think you're going to start to see as well some additional imports going to Europe. Exports going to Europe. The last couple of days we've learned about a jet fuel crisis in Europe because they were heavily dependent on the Middle East. So I would look for tankers to start lining up in the Gulf Coast of the United States to load up with fuel from refineries and head over to Europe as well.
This gives us phenomenal leverage in trade and foreign policy. And that's going to be part of this, Dan. And I think nobody understands oil politics better than Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, you saw that firsthand, Larry, when we were in the White House. We dealt with a different sort of crisis, I guess. Back during the pandemic, we had a demand crash, where we were dealing with negative $37 a barrel oil. And, we had some in the Middle East who wanted to use that as an opportunity to push out our shale producers by both raising production and lowering prices even further in the face of a demand crash. And, our production here in the United States at that point was roughly 13, probably 0.3 million barrels per day. And you and I both watched President Trump deal with, the folks in the Middle East, the King of Saudi Arabia. He dealt with Mr. Putin as well very, very effectively because he had such a strong position from which to argue. We had leverage in those conversations that, frankly, no other president before him had because we were an importing nation. And we watched him negotiate those production cuts out of the Middle East and Russia in a way that, again, no other president could have done at that point in time. And it's all due to our industry's ability to produce here in the United States. And that's why things like permitting reform and things like tax structures matter so much. It's the decisions that we make in the moments of peacetime that pay the consequences, or at least give us the dividends, I should say, in these moments, when we need them.
Right. We can do 14, 15, 16 million. I know we can. Plus what we can get from Latin America. Anyway, Dan Brouillette, former Energy Secretary, thank you ever so much. The U.S. has the whip hand on world energy. We'll take a quick break. Ambassador Robert O'Brien, National Security Advisor, coming up next. I'm Kudlow. Please stick around, folks.